So, one feature of the end times is that we will be increasingly subjected to problems that are beyond our capacity to solve, and in many cases, even beyond our capacity to see. I want to give a specific example of this from my own life in hopes that it helps to flesh out some details of what this looks like, because we can speak in generalities and it might just fly over people's heads. Or they'll say, oh, well, I can see how that is, and this doesn't touch my life at all. Yes, it does. So I've got an aunt and an uncle, and this aunt is probably closer to age in me because she's the youngest in a set of siblings. She's closer to age with me than closer in age to me than most aunts are or uncles. But she is older than me. She's probably 15 years older than me. So a few years ago, they faced this decision of what their only child was going to do in the college years. And the child was particularly gifted at music. And they decided that they were going to send her to one of the fancy music universities. And it was away from home in a very expensive place. Tuition was very expensive. And they were really excited about this. And I tried to talk to them about why that was probably a very bad idea. And I tried to go through cost and benefit with them. And they were polite, but they weren't interested in what I had to say about that. They went with their prior choice, which was to send her. So in the subsequent several years, everything I said would happen happened. And that included massive financial expenditures, which were really hard for them to carry, cultural shift in the beliefs and actions of their daughter, which shocked and surprised them. It didn't do either for me because I've been around college-age people for a very long time. And so on and so forth. It was just a whole basket of pain. And it was unnecessary pain in the sense that it was avoidable, but it was necessary in the sense that they didn't want to make reasonable decisions without experiencing it themselves, if that makes sense. So if they had to do it again, would they do it the same way? No. But what they refused to learn through wisdom, they had to learn through their own experience. And that's not a good thing. So fast forward a bit. So then COVID happened. And I knew that the vaccine was not a good idea early on, in part just because of general wisdom and common sense, and in part because it happened to be the industry I was working in, pharmaceutical industry. And I had a little bit of inside information, which I shared on here and on my blog. But in speaking with them, again, I said it was a bad idea. Well, they got the vaccine. Now, let me break this down a little bit. At the time, both of these people wanted to believe that the institutional experts were really experts, and they really had everyone's best interest at heart, which we know is not true. And it's even more evident now that it's not true than it was before. And they also just really wanted life to be simple. These are very nice people, but they've lived their lives in a way where they have not grown tools to deal with complexity. And so they're very overwhelmed when things happen in life that are outside of what's normal. And at the time, they were already overwhelmed because their parents, I'm trying to just zoom out a little bit, they're facing the challenges of old age issues with their parents. whether, this basket of dementia, one person had dementia, another person was terminally ill, and on and on. There was just a whole basket of these issues between their four parents. And so they got the shot predominantly out of fear, but then also secondarily out of, I think there might have been a booster involved, the desire to visit one of their ailing parents, and they were in a facility where they could only do that if they got the shot. Well, as the parents aged and died, both of them got cancer. So my aunt got breast cancer, my uncle got prostate cancer. And so you fast forward just this tiny window of 3 or 4 years, they have spent enormous amounts of money on health services. They have gone through enormous amounts of stress far beyond their ability to cope with it, which high levels of stress cause tons of problems too, including health problems. They've spent enormous sums of money on not just health things, other things too, with sending their daughter to college and all these other things. And there are other issues there as well, as far as I advised them to sell their house and move to a lower cost of living area. This is years and years ago. In fact, when I had my company, I tried to give my uncle a job because he's a programmer. He's pretty good too. And he didn't want to leave his parents because he had to be there to be with his parents. And if they had taken that offer, they would have sold their house before they spent something like $100,000 in renovations that they've done. Just these are sort of maintenance renovations. It's not really, they needed to be done in order to sell it in the future at a colder market. But had they taken the advice, they would have come to Montana at a time where their house would now be worth double what they paid for it. And you might say, well, but your company went bankrupt. It didn't endure. It didn't succeed. Well, one, that might not have happened if he was here, because to a large extent, that was for factors involving personnel. But even if that had happened, it turns out the job he's at, which he had stayed through this whole time, the company got acquired, and he's very likely to lose his job in the short term. And just on the money he made on the house, he could move back to where he is or any other place, and make a lot of money, a lot more than he could have cleared working. So, but he would have had a paycheck and everything that whole time. So basically, just comparing across the board, their lives have been in this cesspool, this swirling downward spiral, because they're facing problems that they don't have the wisdom to overcome, in the capacity. It's not just wisdom, but the emotional capacity and the intellectual capacity to overcome. But it was all given to them with sufficient reason, and they opted out. So what are the barriers here? Well, one is just this. Now we're getting into the regeneralizing this for things that you can apply in your own life. One is breaking free of this false idea in the modern world that all people are equally capable of solving all problems. Now, when it's phrased like that, any sensible person will say, I don't believe that. You'd be hard-pressed to find someone dumb enough to disagree with that statement. And yet, in practice, how much of your life shows that that is actually what you believe? How offended would you be at the suggestion that some random dude with a scraggly beard has a better idea on solving a problem than you do? You might be highly offended by that. What if what if the claim was that there could be life-altering and, in fact, life-threatening consequences between the two options? like what you think is a good idea and what this other person thinks is a good idea. You know, your very life might be at stake. You might say, oh, that's super offensive, or no way. Who does this guy think he is? And yet the proof is in the pudding. I saw every one of those problems coming, and I told them what was going to happen, and I gave them sufficient reasons to believe I was right. And they opted against it across all of them. And look at the consequences now, right? Both of them are going to die young. They're going to have ongoing health problems because of this. They've effectively lost their daughter. She is going to have a terrible life. And none of it needed to happen. Their parents died anyway. That was going to happen either way. But they're in a much, much worse situation. He's probably going to lose his job. And they went from being pretty high up on the economic curve, all things considered, to their retirement is significantly threatened at this point. And it's probably going to get worse. Life is designed to beat us into humility, not as a punishment, but as a blessing, because it's only as we develop an accurate sense of our capabilities that we will do what it takes to find and or receive wisdom that leads us to better outcomes. And in the end times, what's being removed is this protective coating that's been in place for decades, basically post-World War II, of unmerited prosperity, where life has still gone on, but it's been this synthetic fake version where there's just printed money. We're Scrooge McDuck swimming in the gold coins that no one earned. The gold coins were produced by wisdom that's long gone, and by virtue that's long gone. And mostly by cheap fossil fuels, which are almost long gone. And as this stuff evaporates, we will be exposed to the consequences of our choices in greater and greater intensity and at a faster frequency. And so, getting back to the barriers of what prevents us from recognizing and receiving wisdom through others. I am these people's nephew. I'm not their sibling. I'm not their father. That's really hard. It's hard for parents to hear children. It's hard for uncles and aunts to hear nephews or nieces. There are many other barriers here. You might be a supervisor at your job, and someone you supervise might have a much better idea than you. This doesn't have to be holistic, although wisdom is. Wisdom is different than knowledge in many ways, one of them being that wisdom is holistic. It is cross-domain. Knowledge is not. Knowledge is very specific. Knowledge is what wisdom produces. But wisdom is a process. It's not an outcome. So, anyway, but someone might have a better idea than you, and maybe you're their supervisor at work. Will you listen to it? And how many slam dunks does someone have to land before you pull a Pharaoh and say, look, Joseph of Egypt, the Lord prospers everything that you touch. You're in control of everything I have. Here you go. Now, that's obviously super extreme, and I'm not suggesting that my aunt and uncle should have said, hey, here's our bank account info, like, you tell us what to do. That's not what I'm saying. But how many times does someone have to be right before you include them proactively in decision making? Now, this flies in the face of Western, I'm not going to say Western culture, but Western hubris. Because we, again, getting back, we really believe that we can do everything ourselves. We're like that 2-year-old who can barely walk, but insists that he or she can do everything. You know, let me do it myself. Maybe that's more like 4 years old. But just like that, it's ridiculous. And there's no Like we have a mounting up pile of evidence that suggests otherwise. So it's really important to recognize these artificial barriers that we have, like these rules in our head that, oh, this person looks like this, or sounds like this, or believes this, or is related to me in such and such a way, and therefore it's not possible that they have greater wisdom than me. Remember, Jesus was rejected by everybody in his hometown. And he said, a prophet is not without honor, except among his own kin and in his own country. Why is that? Because of these artificial rules. That's one reason. There are other reasons too. But let's break past that. Let's advance past that. It's increasingly important as we advance into the end times to recognize and use sources of wisdom. Because while God promises us that a way will be provided to overcome what overcomes us, it is very often the case that that way includes other people. And if we don't take advantage of those resources, what we're going to do is we're going to face those obstacles with insufficient ability to overcome. And they will overcome us.